Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? Maybe because she was the only one not fidgeting, not cracking jokes, not trying to prove herself. Maybe because silence, in a room full of people desperate to be seen, was the one thing that terrified them most. The air at Paris Island was a thick, wet blanket, heavy with salt, pine, and the sweat of 300 shouting men and one quiet woman. Recruit Ana Sharma stood at parade rest, her spine a steel rod, eyes locked on the cracked asphalt of the parade deck. Around her, Platoon 3041 moved like a single clumsy organism, young, loud, half-broken, half-proud. She didn't belong here. At least that's what everyone believed. "You are slow, Sharma." Gunnery Sergeant Roar's voice ripped through the morning humidity like a saw blade. He stopped inches from her face, his brim casting a dark shadow across her eyes. "You enjoying the scenery? Did you come here for a vacation?" She didn't flinch, didn't blink. Her voice came calm, even the kind that didn't rise even under fire. "No, Gunnery Sergeant." And that calmness infuriated him more than tears or trembling ever could. To Roar, she was an anomaly, late 20s, too old, too composed. He saw hesitation where there was patience, apathy where there was restraint. He mistook silence for weakness because he'd never seen silence used as a weapon. He saw a woman who moved a half-step behind in formation drills, whose every action was deliberate, not frantic. And in a place built on shouting and sweat, deliberation looked like defiance. "Look at me when I'm talking to you, maggot." Her eyes were already locked on his. Two ranks back, a recruit whispered just loud enough for others to hear. "Hey, librarian, maybe if you read the manual faster, you'd move faster." It was Miller, broad-shouldered, cocky, a man who wore his washed-out Ranger School failure like a badge of honor. His grin was the kind that thrived on easy targets. The name stuck, librarian. The others laughed, grateful for someone else to mock. But Ana didn't react. She just adjusted her grip on her rifle and waited for the laughter to die. Later in the barracks, while they field-stripped their M16A4s on worn blankets, Miller leaned over again. "Try not to shoot any of us by accident tomorrow, librarian." Snickers followed, bouncing down the line. Ana didn't look up. The upper receiver clicked apart from the lower with surgical precision. Her hands moved like clockwork, clean, efficient, hypnotic. She didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Garcia, a wiry recruit from East LA, watched her from the next mat over. She didn't laugh with the others. She'd seen Ana on the conditioning hikes. While the bigger men burned red under their packs, Ana just kept moving. Not fast, not slow, steady, endless, like something that could walk forever. And her eyes always scanning, not the dirt, the horizon, the trees. Assessing, calculating, like someone who'd seen ambushes before. Roar paced behind them, gravel crunching under his boots. "Still with us, Sharma. You look like you're assembling a child's toy. This is a weapon designed to kill. You have what it takes to use it." Ana paused, her fingers resting lightly on the trigger assembly. "Yes, Gunnery Sergeant." He grunted, we'll see at the range." He had already decided she'd fail. She didn't have the fire, the aggression he thought made Marines. He saw compliance. He couldn't see control. That was his first mistake. Combat training. Close quarters. Miller's smirk across the mat. They were paired together for hand-to-hand drills, an instructor's casual cruelty. Miller charged first, roaring, trying to impress everyone. He was bigger, heavier, confident that a few extra pounds of muscle were enough to win. Ana didn't resist. She pivoted, a single step. His own weight carried him forward. Her hand cut down, fast, precise, a nerve strike to the forearm. The rubber knife clattered from his hand as he collapsed to one knee, stunned. The instructor blew his whistle. "Miller, what the hell was that? Get up." Rubbing his arm, Miller growled, "She got lucky." The sergeant's eyes flicked to Ana. He'd seen that kind of motion before, clean, cold, efficient. But he also saw Roar watching, scowling. He said nothing. "Do it again," he ordered. Miller came in slower this time, cautious. He feinted high, lunged low. Ana didn't fight the motion. She went with it, dropping her weight, locking his neck in a flawless guillotine choke. 5 seconds later, Miller was tapping, his face a blotchy red. Roar stepped forward, voice sharp as a blade. "Enough, Sharma, you're done. Go clean the head." To him, it wasn't skill, just coincidence. He needed to remind her and everyone else of their place. Yes, gunnery sergeant. No defiance, no resentment. She walked away, leaving Miller fuming on the mat. Behind her, the whispers spread like a contagion. She was weird. Unnatural. Cold. The rifle range was supposed to end it. Where the jokes would finally break her. Roar's voice carried down the firing line, full of smug expectation. "All right, ladies, let's see who can hit paper today. Miller, you're up." Miller fired his 10 rounds, grouping tight, decent. He puffed his chest, proud. "That's a Marines group, gunny." Roar gave a half-smile. "Adequate." Then it was Ana's turn. No one expected much. Some waited to see her fail spectacularly. She dropped to the ground, not with a thud, but with flow. Her form was textbook, but better, compact, bone stable. She adjusted her sling not like a strap, but like an anchor. She inhaled once, exhaled. Then fired. Crack. Pause. Crack. 10 shots, 1 minute. Each shot was deliberate, like punctuation marks in a quiet confession. Roar squinted through his binoculars as the target came back. Then froze. 10 holes. No, 1 hole. A single ragged tear dead center. Not possible. He snatched the target from the Rangermaster, turning it over in disbelief. His mind refused what his eyes confirmed. "That's a pencil hole," Miller muttered. "She missed the paper with the others." Roar didn't answer. He knew what he was looking at. 6 years as a weapons instructor, he knew the difference between luck and mastery. But it didn't fit, it couldn't. He crumpled the target in his fist. "Do it again." She did. Same result. Silence rippled down the line. For the first time, no one laughed. Even Roar didn't speak. He just walked away, the crumpled paper in his hand feeling heavier than any rifle he'd ever carried. Behind him, the air shifted. The men still avoided Ana, but now their glances weren't mocking, they were cautious. Fearful even. No one understood what they were seeing. And the unknown is always more terrifying than weakness. The weeks dragged toward the final test, the crucible. The swamp training ground known as Mout Town awaited them, a concrete maze where recruits proved what they'd learned. For Ana, it was supposed to be just another exercise. But the world had other plans. Under the blazing Carolina sun, Roar briefed them, voice sharp, sweat soaking through his uniform. Objectives simple: simulated insurgent compound, HVT on the 2nd floor. You get hit, you're out. Retrieve the target and exfil. Clear. He handed out rolls like a judge handing sentences. Miller, point for Alpha. Garcia, Bravo lead. Sharma, rear security with Chun. Rear security, the nothing role, the quiet corner. Miller's smirk returned. Ana's face stayed unreadable. She checked her weapon, checked Chun. Quietly reseated his magazine. The small kindness of someone who knew the difference between alive and dead could be a loose clip. She wasn't angry. She wasn't proud. She was watchful. Because something felt wrong. That old instinct, the cold electric hum that had saved her life too many times to count, crawled up her spine again. The air was too still, the fake city too quiet. She knew that feeling. It meant the past wasn't done with her yet. Why did the sound of the gunfire feel different? It wasn't something she could explain, not in words. The human mind learns to categorize sounds. The hollow snap of blanks, the electronic chirp of simulated hits, the rhythmic drills of training rounds. But this sound, this was something older. Sharper, denser. It had weight. And before anyone else understood it, Ana already knew. The game was over. The platoon had begun their raid just as instructed. Miller at the front, Garcia's team sweeping the flank, Chun and Ana at the rear, the roles set, the rhythm predictable. Doors were kicked in. Shouts echoed through empty rooms. The sound of Miles' gear, that synthetic ping of fake death, filled the air. It was a controlled storm of noise. Until it was. The first crack split the air like a lightning strike. Then another. Then the long, angry snarl of automatic fire. Concrete chips exploded from the wall inches from Roar's head. And that was the moment the world tilted sideways. No one moved. For one eternal second, the recruits stood frozen, waiting for someone to yell, "Exercise reset." No one did. The next bullet punched through a metal door with a sound that made everyone's stomach drop. That was not simulation fire. Screams erupted. One of the instructors on the catwalk went down, a dark stain blooming across his chest. Roar ducked for cover, shouting into his radio. "All stations, live fire at MOUT Town. We're under real-world attack." The courtyard exploded into chaos, recruits scattering like birds, training forgotten. Garcia dove behind a window frame, dragging two others with her. Miller sprinted for cover behind a burned-out car, face pale, breath ragged. And Ana didn't move. Not out of fear, out of calculation. Her eyes tracked the direction of the shots. She saw muzzle flashes on the rooftops, elevated crossfire angles. 3, maybe 4 shooters, disciplined, coordinated. This wasn't random. This was an ambush. Beside her, Chun was trembling, rifle shaking in his hands. What's happening? Is this part of? "Stay down," Ana said. Her voice was low, calm. It wasn't the voice of a recruit anymore. She grabbed his collar and yanked him behind a solid concrete corner, just as another burst of live fire tore through where they'd been standing. "Keep your head down and don't move until I tell you." He nodded, eyes wide, chest heaving. Ana scanned the ground, spotted one of the fallen recruits in the open courtyard. His body sprawled face down, a rifle beside him. A real rifle. Loaded with real ammunition. Her mind processed it instantly. Someone had mixed live ammo into the exercise. Whether by accident or design didn't matter now. She exhaled once. Then she moved. Not running, flowing. Her body moved in zigzags, low, unpredictable, like water avoiding every bullet that tried to find her. Dirt sprayed around her boots. Concrete chipped and sparked at her heels. She reached the fallen recruit, scooped up his rifle, and dove behind a concrete barrier. "Check the mag." "Live." Her finger brushed the selector switch, flipped it to semi. One breath in. One breath out. And the world shrank to the width of her sights. From the catwalk, Roar watched in disbelief. He saw her move with precision he didn't know was possible. That calm, detached posture, the same one he'd mistaken for weakness, now looked like something else entirely. Her first shot cracked across the courtyard, aimed not at a man, but a loose sheet of metal propped against a rooftop ledge. It clanged loudly. The shooter behind it flinched, exposing his face for a fraction of a second. Her second shot came instantly. The target disappeared backward, lifeless. No hesitation. No celebration. Roar's binoculars trembled in his hands. The recruit he'd written off as a liability had just dropped a gunman at 200 yards with a borrowed rifle. The next few seconds blurred into instinct. Ana's breathing slowed even further. She counted rhythm between bursts of enemy fire. 1, 2, pause. A flicker of movement, a second shooter leaning from a rooftop window. She fired once. The man fell out of view. 2 down. But there was no time to think. The others were repositioning. She could feel it, the pattern of their fire tightening around her. Bullets slammed into her cover, throwing up splinters of stone. Chun flinched behind her, pressing into the dirt. He was shaking uncontrollably. Ana didn't even glance back. She listened, measured, mapped every muzzle flash in her mind like coordinates. One on the opposite rooftop. One moving ground level. At least one flanking. They had her zeroed. If she stayed still, she was dead. Chun, she said, eyes still on the fight. When I move, lay down fire on that far window. Just noise. Don't worry about hitting anything. They won't know your blanks. Can you do that? He stammered, terrified. I have blanks. They don't know that, she cut him off gently. Make it sound real. Her voice carried the kind of certainty that steadies even the frightened. He nodded. On my go. She took a deep breath. Then, now. Chun fired a full auto burst toward the distant window. The roar of the rifle filled the alley, indistinguishable from real gunfire. The rooftop shooter ducked instinctively, that half-second flinch all she needed. Ana broke from cover and sprinted again, low, fast, cutting across open ground toward Garcia's building. Bullets chased her heels. She reached the doorway, slammed into cover, heart steady, breathing even. Garcia's eyes went wide as Ana appeared beside her, silent, controlled, alive. What's your status? Ana asked. Garcia's voice shook. Pinned down, Miller's stuck behind the car, roars hit, I mean he's on the catwalk with 2 down. Ana nodded once, absorbing everything. Ammo. Just what we grabbed from the dead, Garcia whispered. Give it to me. Garcia didn't question it. She handed over the mags. The platoon's hierarchy had dissolved. Authority had evaporated. But something else filled the void, a new center of gravity. The recruits looked at Ana not as a peer, but as a gravity well in chaos. She wasn't giving orders to prove herself. She was saving them because she already had before. Listen to me, Ana said, voice low, clipped, precise. They have high ground and lines of sight on this courtyard. We stay here, we die. We move, we live. We'll flank them through that alley, come around from the side. The recruits nodded automatically. Fear and training warred inside them, but her calm anchored them. They think we're trapped, she said. They're wrong. She raised her rifle and shot the lock off the back door. 2 precise rounds, nothing wasted. Move. They followed her out into a narrow alley choked with trash and broken glass. The smell of diesel and mud clung to the air. Ana moved first, rifle up, eyes scanning rooftops. Every few feet she stopped, listening. Her head tilted slightly, just enough to catch the echo of distant boots, the hiss of a reloaded magazine. They moved like shadows. Even the recruits behind her started matching her rhythm, shorter steps, slower breaths, quieter movements. At the end of the alley, Ana raised her fist. Everyone froze. She leaned out just enough to see the courtyard again. 2 bodies. Miller still crouched behind his car, firing blindly. And up above, the last rooftop shooter. Overconfident, standing too tall. Garcia, Ana whispered, spotter, see him. Garcia nodded, pale but steady. Yeah, black vest, top floor. I'm taking him. She knelt, using the corner of the building as a brace. The rifle settled into her shoulder like an old friend. Her breathing slowed. Up on the catwalk, Colonel Vance. The visiting officer watched through binoculars. He'd seen her sprint for the rifle, seen the impossible accuracy. And now he recognized it. Not the technique, the stillness. He'd seen it before, in people who didn't exist on record. "Who was that recruit?" he asked quietly. Roar, crouched beside him, still holding pressure on a wounded instructor, answered numbly. "Sharma, sir. Ana Sharma, problem recruit. Slow, insubordinate." Vance didn't look away from his binoculars. "That's not a problem recruit," he murmured. "That's a ghost." Ana exhaled. "Fired." The man on the roof stiffened, then toppled over the edge, weapon clattering down. 3 down. The gunfire faltered. The last shooter, the one on the ground, panicked. He bolted from cover, sprinting across open asphalt toward the target building. Garcia pointed, there. Ana didn't look where Garcia pointed. She already had him. 3-round burst. The first 2 rounds kicked up concrete in front of his feet. He flinched, stumbled. The third caught him clean through the chest. He hit the ground hard. 4 down. And then silence. The kind that feels heavy. Real. Only sirens echoed faintly from the distance, growing closer. Miller slowly peeked over the hood of his car, face drained of color. He saw the 4 bodies, the smoke, the wreckage. And Ana standing in the alley, rifle lowered, scanning rooftops, calm as if none of it surprised her. Because it didn't. Roar's breath caught. He knew the look in her eyes. It wasn't adrenaline, it was muscle memory. And finally, the realization began to dawn. This woman, the one he tried to break, wasn't new to war. She'd just been trying to forget it. She turned toward the others, voice firm, echoing across the courtyard. "Stay in cover, sound off team leaders." No hesitation. No permission asked. She wasn't a recruit anymore. She was the chain of command itself. Garcia answered, "Bravo secure." Miller's voice came next, shaky but alive. "Alpha's good, we're okay." Ana nodded once. "Hold positions, QRF inbound." Then she turned to Garcia. "Let's clear that building and get to the catwalk." They moved. Together. Inside, the air reeked of gunpowder and dust. Every corner was cleared with a precision that came from somewhere far older than boot camp. Garcia followed close, trying to mimic Ana's form, how she led with her weapon, how she listened before stepping. They finished clearing the building in under a minute. When they emerged, the first Humvee screeched into the courtyard, Marines pouring out, weapons drawn. It was over. But for Ana Sharma, the quiet woman, the so-called librarian, something much deeper had just begun. How did a ghost end up back in uniform? The courtyard was still smoking when the quick reaction force arrived. Humvees screeched to a halt, Marines in full kit fanning out, rifles raised, eyes darting between the rooftops. The air reeked of burnt cordite and fear. But in the center of it all, surrounded by confusion and blood and silence, stood Ana Sharma, calm, still, her weapon at the low ready. For a moment, no one moved. The scene didn't make sense. A handful of recruits, faces pale, eyes wide, huddled behind cover, shaking. 4 bodies lay sprawled across the asphalt. And one woman stood between them, unflinching. Gunnery Sergeant Roar rose shakily from where he'd been kneeling over the wounded instructor. His hands were slick with blood, his mind still trying to process what he'd witnessed. He looked at Ana, the recruit he'd spent weeks trying to break, and felt something like vertigo. She turned toward the sound of the Humvees, lowering her rifle, but her posture didn't change. She wasn't surrendering, she was assessing. Colonel Vance descended from the catwalk, his face tight with purpose. His uniform was spattered with dust and streaked with another man's blood. He strode toward Ana, boots striking the metal stairs like gunshots. As he approached, he saw her more clearly, the way her stance never relaxed, the economy of her breathing, the faint tremor of adrenaline controlled through sheer will. And something else. Something burned deep in her eyes, not panic, not pride, recognition. He stopped a few feet away. "Recruit Sharma," he said quietly. Her gaze met his, steady, level. "Colonel," she replied, voice low, even. Behind them, medics worked frantically on the wounded instructor. A young Marine captain rushed up, saluting. "Sir, the area's secure. 4 hostiles neutralized. 1 KIA instructor, 1 critical. QRF sweep in progress." Vance nodded curtly. "Get your men checking the perimeter. No one leaves this facility." The captain hesitated, glancing at Ana. "And what about her, sir?" Vance's eyes flicked toward the recruit, the calm center of the chaos. "She stays," he said flatly. The captain blinked, confused. "Sir." "She stays, that's an order." Ana's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her gaze, the faintest shadow of resignation. She knew what was coming. Vance stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "What the hell are you doing here?" She didn't answer immediately. Her rifle was slung now, her hands resting lightly on the stock. Her eyes drifted past him to the recruit still huddled in shock. Then softly, "Trying to disappear, sir." Vance's jaw tightened. "Into a Marine recruit platoon." "It worked," she said, "until today." He studied her, really studied her now. Her calmness wasn't defiance, it was armor. A habit formed from too many near-deaths, too many secrets buried beneath classified ink. Then his eyes caught it, just barely visible under her cuff. A tattoo. A black lotus, stylized and worn with time. His breath hitched. That symbol didn't belong to any ordinary Marine. It belonged to a unit that officially didn't exist. He exhaled slowly. "I thought you were dead." Ana's eyes flicked up. For the first time, something like emotion cracked her composure, a tiny fracture, gone as soon as it appeared. "Reports were exaggerated, sir." Vance shook his head, disbelief and old grief crossing his features. "Damascus Station went dark. The whole network collapsed. We wrote everyone off. You were on the KIA list, Callie." The name hit the air like a dropped weapon. Chun, crouched nearby, blinked in confusion. Garcia's head turned sharply. "Callie," Vance repeated softer, "you shouldn't be here." Ana, Callie, didn't flinch, but the weight of that name settled heavy in the space between them. "Sir," she said quietly, "you know better than anyone. The dead go where they please." On the catwalk above, Roar froze. He'd heard the name too. For years he'd told the stories, ghost stories, really, about a woman they called Callie, an assassin, an operator from a unit so black it didn't even have a proper designation. Some said she'd neutralized entire cells in the Hindu Kush. Others swore she'd single-handedly extracted an intel officer from a city no map dared to label. The numbers were impossible, triple digits, maybe more. She vanished after Damascus, presumed dead. And now here she was. In his platoon. Scrubbing floors, folding socks, pretending to be human. Roar's chest felt hollow. Every insult, every sneer he'd thrown her way replayed in his mind like a confession. He looked down at the recruits. Miller pale, trembling. Garcia standing stiff with awe. And Ana, her face still calm, unreadable. He felt something new, shame, deep and cutting. Vance gestured toward the carnage. "You know what this means. This incident goes in reports. Your name, your fingerprints. You'll be flagged before the ink dries." "I know," she said. "You'll be dragged back into the system, Callie. And once you're back, there's no leaving again." Ana's expression didn't change. "Maybe I deserve that." Vance looked at her, something like pity in his eyes. "You think you can bury what you've done by wearing a recruit's uniform, by starting over?" "I wasn't burying it," she said softly. I was learning how to live with it. He exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You never learn to live with ghosts, you just learn to keep them quiet. A moment of silence stretched between them, heavy, intimate, full of everything that didn't need to be said. Then from behind him, a voice rasped, "Sir." "Roar." He approached hesitantly, still in shock. His normally booming tone was subdued, unsure. "Gunnery Sergeant," Vance said. "Sir," Roar's throat tightened. "I need to say." "You don't," Vance interrupted gently. "You've already seen enough." But Roar shook his head. His pride had been gutted cleanly, and what remained was humility. "No, sir. She saved every soul in this training field, including mine." Ana looked at him then, her gaze softening just slightly. Roar swallowed hard. "I thought I knew what makes a Marine. I was wrong." His words hung there, raw and unpolished, the only kind that mattered. The QRF captain jogged up, saluting. "Sir, perimeter's clear. 4 confirmed dead. No insignia, no ID, looks like mercenaries. Base lockdown in effect." Vance nodded. "Get CID here, and someone from operations group off the record." "Yes, sir." The captain hesitated again, glancing at Ana. "And her, sir, should we?" Vance's gaze hardened. "She's not your concern, Captain." "Yes, sir." As the captain jogged away, Roar finally found the courage to speak quietly, almost to himself. "Triple-digit kill count," he muttered. "God help me, I called her a liability." Ana's lips twitched, almost a smile, almost sorrow. "We all see what we're ready to see, Gunny." Vance looked at her one last time. "What do you want to do?" It wasn't a command. It was a question, one soldier to another. Ana looked out across the courtyard. Chun sat on the ground, staring at his trembling hands. Garcia leaned against the wall, silent. Miller couldn't meet her eyes. The recruits, her accidental platoon, were alive because of her. And that mattered more than whatever ghosts trailed behind her name. "I want to finish my training," she said quietly. "I came here to become a Marine. I intend to do that." Vance studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Then finish it." He stepped back, drew himself up, and did something that froze everyone within sight. He raised his hand in a slow, formal salute. Not a colonel's salute to a recruit. A warrior's salute to another. Ana hesitated for only a second before returning it, crisp, perfect, silent. The courtyard held its breath. Roar watched, eyes stinging, throat tight. He'd spent his whole career teaching recruits what it meant to earn that salute. And today, he'd seen someone who didn't need to be taught. As medics loaded the wounded, Vance turned back one last time. "Your cover's blown. You won't be invisible again." "I was never meant to be," Ana said softly. He nodded once, then left, boots echoing against the concrete. Roar stood there, staring at her, this woman he'd misjudged so completely. He wanted to speak, but words felt useless. Finally he managed, "Thank you." It sounded too small, too fragile. But Ana nodded, "You're welcome, Gunny." And that was enough. Hours later, MOUT town was cordoned off, swarming with investigators and men in plain clothes who didn't wear name tags. Platoon 3041 was escorted back to the barracks, placed under strict silence orders. The official report would call it a live ammunition mishap. A tragic accident. No mention of mercenaries. No mention of a ghost named Callie. But everyone who'd been there, every recruit, every instructor knew better. In the dim light of the barracks, Ana sat on her bunk, disassembling the rifle she'd used. The one that wasn't hers. The one Vance had refused to confiscate. Piece by piece, she cleaned it, methodical, reverent. It wasn't about maintenance, it was a ritual. A way of touching something she understood when everything else felt unreal. Across the room, Miller sat with his head in his hands. He hadn't spoken since they returned. Every joke, every sneer, Every casual insult burned through him now like acid. He looked up at her finally, his voice hoarse. "You were never one of us, were you?" Ana paused, the cloth frozen in her hand. Then she said, "No, Miller, I was never one of anyone." The barracks went quiet again. The recruits lay awake long after lights out, staring at the ceiling, each one changed in some small, silent way. Outside, the night hummed with cicadas. The swamp air was thick and still. And in the dark, Ana lay awake, eyes open, unblinking. She'd saved lives today, but the faces of the men she'd killed joined the long procession that haunted her dreams. They never left. They never did. And as the first faint light of dawn touched the windows, she whispered to no one, "Sometimes I forget who I was pretending to be." Why couldn't she sleep? The barracks were silent, the kind of silence that wasn't peace but pressure. Every breath, every creak of the metal bunks seemed too loud. Ana Sharma lay awake, staring at the springs above her. The hum of the ventilation system filled the space like static. Her mind replayed the firefight again and again, the sounds, the angles, the faces. Not the living ones. The dead. Every trigger pull echoed long after it ended. She could still feel the recoil against her shoulder, the dry heat of gunpowder on her tongue, the scent of blood mixing with wet earth. Those things never left you. Not even when you changed your name. Her name. Callie. It sounded alien now, like a word from someone else's story. She buried that name under discipline, routine, silence. She thought if she stripped herself down far enough, no rank, no identity, no ego, maybe she could find something clean beneath it. But the firefight had ripped all that open again. And she saw what she'd really buried wasn't the past. It was herself. A floorboard creaked. Ana didn't move, but her senses sharpened instantly, muscles tightening without thought. She tracked the footsteps slow, hesitant, approaching her bunk. Then a whisper. "Sharma." It was Miller. He stood beside her bunk, voice unsteady. I saw what you did back there." She stayed silent. "I was scared. I froze," he said, his words cracking in the dark. "You didn't, you saved us." He swallowed hard, guilt tightening his throat. "Everything I said to you, calling you librarian, grandma, all that crap, I was an idiot." Ana turned her head, her face half-lit by the moonlight through the blinds. Her expression was calm, but there was something soft in her eyes. "Forget it, Miller," she said quietly. "We're all just recruits here." He nodded, a shaky smile flickering. "Yeah, recruits." But they both knew that wasn't true. He lingered for a moment, then retreated back to his bunk. Ana watched him go, the sound of his footsteps fading. Then she exhaled slowly, eyes drifting toward the ceiling again. She didn't need forgiveness. She needed purpose. And that, she realized, was the one thing she'd never stopped craving. Morning came heavy, gray, humid. The sky over Paris Island hung low and swollen, threatening rain. Platoon 3041 assembled on the parade deck, their movements slower, quieter. No jokes, no swagger. They stood straighter, eyes forward, shoulders squared not out of pride but out of understanding. Gunnery Sergeant Rohr walked the line, clipboard in hand, his usual bark absent. He inspected uniforms with mechanical precision, but when he reached Ana, he paused. Her posture was perfect, it always was, her rifle clean, boots gleaming. He met her eyes, and for the first time there was no contempt, no competition. Just respect. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Then moved on. That was his apology. For men like Rohr, words were too fragile to carry what needed to be said. The platoon began their morning run. Boots striking asphalt in rhythm, a single living heartbeat. The sound was different now. Tighter, unified. They were no longer a group of strangers fighting to prove themselves. They had faced death together, and death had changed their cadence. And at the center of it all, setting the pace, was the quiet woman they once mocked. Over the following days, whispers spread like currents beneath the surface. No one spoke of what happened at Mout Town, not directly. They weren't allowed to. But silence has its own way of spreading stories. They said she'd fought like 10 men. They said she didn't miss a single shot. They said even the colonel had saluted her. No one laughed at her anymore. No one called her librarian. When she passed in the chow hall, conversation stopped. Some looked away out of fear. Others watched her with quiet admiration. And a few like Garcia with something deeper, gratitude. Garcia began sitting across from her during meals. Never many words exchanged, just quiet companionship. The kind built on survival. Once during lunch, Garcia finally broke the silence. You ever think about what comes after this, after graduation? Ana looked up from her tray, expression unreadable. I think about finishing what I started. Garcia nodded slowly. That's it. That's all I'm allowed right now. Garcia hesitated. You could have left, after what happened. You had the colonel's respect. You could have walked away. Ana's gaze drifted out the window. Rain had started, a thin, steady drizzle turning the asphalt into mirrors. I've been walking away my whole life, she said softly. This time I want to walk forward. Garcia didn't respond. She just nodded because she understood. At night, Ana's dreams bled together. Mout Town, Damascus, 100 nameless places. Her mind stitched them into one long, endless battle where the dead never stayed buried. She woke often, drenched in sweat, the echo of a rifle still ringing in her ears. But she never screamed. She never moved. She just lay there, letting the darkness settle back over her. One night, she sat up quietly and pulled open her footlocker. Inside, beneath her neatly folded uniforms, was a small metal case. No markings, no lock. She opened it slowly. Inside lay an old photograph, faded, creased at the edges. 5 people, all in desert fatigues, no patches, no names. She stared at it for a long time. One of them, a woman with the same sharp eyes and calm half-smile, looked almost like her, but not quite. That was the person she'd buried. That was Callie. She closed the case and slid it back under the uniforms. The past was still there, just quieter now. Waiting. During training drills, she worked like clockwork, precise, silent, tireless. When the others stumbled, she steadied them. When they panicked, she calmed them. Even Roar had stopped shouting. He watched her now with something close to reverence. Once, during a weapons inspection, he found himself standing beside her again. She was checking her rifle, her movements exact, economical. He cleared his throat. You ever gonna tell me where you learned to shoot like that? Ana didn't look up. You wouldn't believe me if I did. He almost smiled. Try me. She paused, just long enough for him to notice. Then, the kind of places where believing gets people killed. Roar stared at her, his lips pressing into a thin line. He didn't push further. There was a gravity to her words that didn't invite curiosity. He realized then that he didn't need to know what she'd done. He just needed to remember it. Weeks passed. The graduation date loomed. The platoon that once mocked her now moved with her rhythm. Her presence changed everything, not through speeches or lectures, but through quiet example. When recruits stumbled under their packs, she'd steady them without a word. When exhaustion made tempers flare, her calmness anchored them. She became the silent standard, the reminder that strength didn't always shout. Even Miller changed. He no longer strutted or boasted, he listened, learned. During field drills, he began unconsciously mirroring her movements, the same low stance, the same controlled breaths. Garcia teased him once. "Careful, Miller, you're starting to look like her." He smiled faintly. "We should all be so lucky." One humid afternoon, as the platoon practiced urban clearing drills, a helicopter thundered low over the range. Roar looked up, frowning. No flight had been scheduled. The bird circled once, then peeled away toward the restricted side of the base, the black zone reserved for operations that didn't officially exist. Ana watched it silently, eyes narrowing slightly. Something about the way it moved, the pattern, she knew it. Old habits never died. They just circled back overhead when you least expected them. Roar followed her gaze. Something wrong. She shook her head. Just familiar. He studied her for a long moment. You ever think about going back? Ana's expression didn't change. No, she said finally, but sometimes it thinks about me. That night, as lights went out and the barracks fell silent again, she lay awake listening to the steady rhythm of breathing all around her. Men she'd saved. Lives she'd changed. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a ghost among the living. She still carried her past, the kills, the missions, the endless ledger of violence that could never be balanced. But maybe redemption wasn't about forgetting what you'd done. Maybe it was about finding something worth carrying alongside it. Her eyes drifted closed, and in that thin space between waking and sleep, she heard a voice, her own maybe, or something older. "You can't kill the past," it said, "but you can teach it to walk beside you." She didn't dream that night. Only peace, fragile, temporary, but real. Why did the world feel quieter the day she finally earned her uniform? The morning of graduation came with a soft drizzle that blurred the horizon, the parade deck reflecting gray skis like wet glass. The recruits stood in perfect formation, dress blues pressed, boots shining like mirrors. But even in that rigid symmetry, something in Platoon 3041 was different. They stood taller, not because they'd been trained to, but because they'd learned why they had to. At the far end of the deck, Gunnery Sergeant Roar's voice carried through the mist, steady but subdued. He didn't shout today. He didn't need to. Each name echoed through the humid air, one more story closed, one more life remade through sweat, pain, and obedience. When he reached her name, there was a pause. Recruit Ana Sharma. She stepped forward, calm and precise, eyes locked ahead. He handed her the insignia, the eagle, globe, and anchor, the symbol that marked her not as a recruit, but a Marine. She accepted it without expression, her grip steady. But when his fingers brushed hers, he felt the faint tremor beneath the surface. Not fear, not weakness, something deeper, the ghost of a burden that never left. Roar met her eyes. "Congratulations, Marine," he said quietly. And for the first time since she'd set foot on that island, Ana smiled. Barely, but enough. The platoon cheered, boots pounding, voices rising through the rain. Even Miller clapped loudest, the sound thick with pride and relief. Garcia wiped her eyes. "You did it," she whispered when Ana passed. "No," Ana said softly, "we did." Later, after the ceremony, the recruits gathered by the barracks one last time. They were different people now, bonded by what they'd survived, both seen and unseen. Roar stood apart, watching them from the shade of the flagpole. He felt something he hadn't felt in years, humility. He'd seen courage before, in combat and blood. But never like this. Ana approached quietly. She wore her new uniform like she'd been born in it. "Permission to speak freely, Gunny." He nodded. "You were a good teacher," she said. He almost laughed. "No, Marine, you just already knew everything I was supposed to teach you." She shook her head. "No one knows everything. You reminded me what it looks like to start over." For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain dripped from the awning. Finally, Roar said, You planning on staying in? I don't know yet, she said, but for once I'm not running. He nodded slowly. That's a good start. As she turned to leave, he added quietly, wherever you go next, you'll do fine, Sharma. She looked back over her shoulder. You mean Callie? He blinked, then smirked faintly. Doesn't matter what name you use, you've earned both. For a few days, peace held. Paperwork, packing. Simple, quiet routines. But peace never lasted long in Anna's life. It started with the envelope. Plain brown, unmarked. Left on her bunk one evening after chow. Inside, a single photograph. Black and white, grainy. A man's face. Late 40s, Middle Eastern features, eyes full of cruel intelligence. Scrawled on the back, in handwriting she knew too well. He's alive. Anna's breath froze. She sat there for a long time, staring at the photo until the light faded from the window. The handwriting belonged to Colonel Vance. And the man in the picture, she'd killed him 3 years ago in Aleppo. The next morning, the base felt different. Tense, watchful. 2 men in plain clothes arrived during morning formation. They weren't local command. They didn't wear insignia. But everyone knew what they were. Roar met them near the administrative offices. Can I help you, gentlemen? The taller one smiled thinly. We're here for Marine Sharma. Roar's jaw tightened. She's earned her transfer. She's not under any disciplinary. The man cut him off. This isn't disciplinary. He handed Roar a folded sheet. Authorization signed by Colonel Vance. Roar's heart sank. He looked across the parade deck where Ana stood, helping Garcia adjust her gear bag, calm as ever. He wanted to protect her. But he knew that once the black-suited men came, protection wasn't part of the vocabulary anymore. In the briefing room, Ana sat across from the 2 men, posture relaxed but guarded. The taller one, a clean-shaven man with cold blue eyes, spoke first. You've been hard to find, Callie. She didn't answer. We're not here to drag you back, he said, but there's a problem, something we can't solve without you. I'm not your asset anymore, she said flatly. He smiled faintly. You might want to hear what the problem is before deciding that. He slid the photograph across the table. The same one from the envelope. He's alive, the man said, and he's not alone. Ana stared at the image, every muscle tightening imperceptibly. That's not possible, she whispered. We thought the same, the man said. But 2 days ago, a convoy in Yemen was ambushed. Satellite footage confirms a match. Same facial structure, same gait. He's resurfaced, and he's targeting former assets, people you worked with in Damascus. Ana's throat went dry. How many? 4 dead so far, 2 missing. The pattern's clear, you're on the list. She closed her eyes for a second. The past wasn't circling her anymore. It had found her. That night she sat outside the barracks on the concrete steps, the air thick with the smell of rain and gun oil. Garcia found her there, staring into the darkness. You're leaving, aren't you? Ana didn't look at her. Looks that way. Back to them. A pause, maybe. Garcia sat beside her. Neither spoke for a while. Finally, Garcia said softly, You don't owe them anything. Ana's jaw flexed. Maybe not, but I owe the people they're hunting. Garcia nodded, understanding. Then go do what you have to. Ana looked at her, really looked. You make a good Marine, Garcia. Garcia smiled faintly, learned from the best. They shook hands. The gesture was simple, but heavy, the kind that carried unspoken promises. Before dawn, Ana reported to the small airstrip on the far side of the base. The same 2 men waited by a transport jet, the kind that took off without flight logs. Roar was there too. He'd found out somehow. He stood by the chain-link fence, arms crossed, eyes hard. You sure about this? No, she said honestly, but I can't hide anymore. He nodded slowly. You never could. She took a step closer. Thank you, Gunny, for treating me like a recruit when I needed to be one. He gave a small, proud nod. You'll always be one of mine, Sharma. She smiled faintly. That's the first time you've called me that without yelling. He chuckled under his breath. Don't get used to it. They stood in silence as the engines warmed. When she finally turned to leave, he called after her, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. Whatever you find out there, don't forget what you built here. She looked back once. I won't. Then she boarded the plane. From the sky, Paris Island looked small, a patch of green surrounded by endless water. Ana watched it shrink below, her reflection faint in the window. The uniform she'd earned sat heavy on her shoulders. It wasn't just fabric and thread. It was a symbol of the one thing she thought she could never reclaim, humanity. But now the past demanded payment. She closed her eyes, feeling the vibration of the engines through her bones. And in the darkness behind her eyelids, she saw faces, not of enemies but of ghosts. Old comrades, old debts. And one in particular, the man in the photograph, the one she'd supposedly killed. His voice came back to her, echoing from a memory she'd tried to bury. You can't kill an idea, Callie. Only the people who believe in it. The words chilled her more than the cabin air ever could. She opened her eyes, the ocean stretching endlessly below. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure who she was, a marine, a ghost, or something in between. But one thing she knew for certain. Running was over. This time she was going back not as a weapon, not as a myth, but as a woman who'd learned to live again. And if her past came for her, she'd meet it standing. When the jet touched down, the air felt thinner, sharper, like every breath cost a little more. Ana stepped onto the tarmac and smelled jet fuel, desert dust, and something older, memory. A row of hangars stretched ahead, painted the color of sandstorms. No insignia, no flags, just wind and silence. Two men waited beside a black SUV. One of them she recognized instantly, Colonel Vance. He looked tired, older, but his eyes still held that same wary respect. "Welcome back," he said. She almost smiled. "You don't look surprised." "I stopped being surprised by you a long time ago." He motioned to the SUV. "We're wheels up in 10 minutes, debrief, waiting at the compound." As the vehicle rolled away, Ana stared out the window. Miles of wasteland stretched toward a horizon the color of rust. Vance broke the silence. "I didn't want to bring you in like this." "I know," she said. "You built something for yourself down there. You earned peace, but you saw the photo." "Yes." "He's alive, Callie." She looked at him then. "Stop calling me that." He nodded slowly. "All right, Ana then, but whatever name you use, you know what he represents." She turned back to the window. An old mistake that refuses to stay buried. The compound sat hidden in a basin carved out of rock, low buildings, antenna arrays, the smell of sand and oil. Inside, the lights were harsh, fluorescent, buzzing like angry bees. In the briefing room, a wall of monitors glowed with satellite feeds and intercepted comms. Vance handed her a thin folder. 3 weeks ago, a convoy carrying refugee intel officers was ambushed near Marib. Survivors say the attackers spoke Russian and Pashto. They were led by a man they called Kadir. Ana's throat tightened. "He's supposed to be dead." "So were you," Vance said quietly. She flipped through the photos, burned vehicles, bodies, blurred figures in desert fatigues. Then one image stopped her. A symbol spray-painted on a wall, a black lotus. Her tattoo. She stared at it, pulse steady but cold. "He's not just alive, he's hunting." Vance nodded. "And he's sending a message to you." The rest of the team filed in, 5 operators she didn't recognize. They looked her over with curiosity. some with open skepticism. "This is our consultant," one of them muttered. "She looks like she just stepped out of basic." Ana didn't react. She'd heard that tone before. It was always the same right before it turned into respect or silence. Vance ignored the comment. "She's your advisor on this op. You'll do exactly what she says." One of the men, a lean sniper named Tors, smirked. "And who exactly is she?" Vance met his gaze. "The reason any of you are still breathing after Damascus." Tor's smirk faded. Later in the armory, Ana checked her gear. The rifle felt strange in her hands at first, like revisiting a language she hadn't spoken in years. But the rhythm came back quickly. Check, chamber, scope, breathe. Tors approached, holding a suppressed carbine. "You really the one from the stories?" She looked up. "Depends which story." "The one about the convoy outside Raqqa, 50 hostiles, no backup." Ana's face didn't move. "That wasn't a story." He gave a low whistle and walked away. That night, she lay in her bunk in the temporary quarters. The room was small, metal bed, dim light, no windows. The same kind of room where she used to wait before missions. Sleep didn't come. Instead, the past replayed itself like static behind her eyes. Damascus. The heat. The alley that smelled of fire and dust. Kadyr's face as the building collapsed, as her team burned. She remembered dragging Vance out of the rubble, bleeding, refusing to leave. She remembered the last transmission before blackout. Operation Damascus terminated. All assets presumed KIA. She walked away from that crater alive, but part of her hadn't followed. Now the other half had come to claim her. They deployed before dawn. The desert stretched infinite under the first pale light. The mission was surgical. Intercept a convoy near the Yemeni border rumored to be smuggling Kadyr's lieutenants. Ana rode in the lead truck, headset pressed to one ear, eyes scanning the ridges. The men around her were tense, murmuring into comms, their banter brittle. Tors leaned toward her. "You ever get used to this?" "No," she said. "If you do, you've been doing it too long." He gave a dry laugh. "Guess that makes you the longest-serving rookie in history." She almost smiled. Then the radio crackled. "Eagle 1, this is Hawk 3, heat signature ahead. 5 vehicles moving fast." Vance's voice came through the comm. "Confirm target." "Confirmed," Ana said. "They're expecting us." A pause. "How do you know?" She looked at the dust trails shifting on the horizon, the tight formation. "Because I taught him this formation." The ambush hit first. A flash from the ridgeline, then a thunderclap of RPG fire. The lead vehicle exploded into shrapnel and sand. Ana was thrown sideways, ears ringing. "Contact, contact," Tors shouted. Bullets shredded the air, biting into metal and flesh. Ana rolled behind a dune, heart hammering but mind calm. She sighted the muzzle flash on the ridge and squeezed the trigger once. The shooter dropped. "Left flank 2 more," she yelled. Her voice cut through the chaos, measured, commanding. The team responded instinctively, moving on her callouts. Within minutes, the gunfire faded. The desert went quiet again, smoke rising in thin ribbons. "Status," Vance's voice demanded. 3 wounded, Tors replied. "We lost the driver, convoy destroyed." Ana scanned the ridge through her scope and froze. A lone figure stood there, silhouetted against the dawn. Tall, still, watching. She recognized the stance instantly. "Kadir." He raised a hand in mock salute, then disappeared into the glare. Back at the compound, Vance slammed his hand on the map table. "He was there, you saw him." "Yes." "Then why didn't you take the shot?" Ana met his eyes. "Because he wanted me to." Vance exhaled through his teeth. "You think this is personal?" "It is personal," she said. "He's recreating Damascus piece by piece. He wants me to follow the trail." Then we use that. She shook her head. You don't use bait like that. You spring it or you get buried with it. Vance leaned forward. You didn't come here to play defense. Finish it, call Ana. Her jaw tightened. I will. That evening, Ana walked alone to the perimeter fence. The sun was setting, painting the desert blood red. She lit a cigarette, though she hadn't smoked in years. The first drag burned like confession. Behind her, footsteps approached, Tors. He leaned on the fence beside her. You really think you can kill him? If I can find him. And if you can't. She glanced at him, then he finds me. He studied her profile in the fading light. You know, most people don't volunteer to walk back into hell. She exhaled smoke. Most people never left it. Later that night, she opened the folder again. At the bottom, beneath the photo, was a handwritten note from Vance. If you go after him, do it your way. But don't forget what you found at Paris Island. She read the line 3 times. The faces of her recruits came back, Garcia's quiet courage, Miller's awkward apology, Roar's silent nod. They were her reminder that she could still build, not just destroy. She closed the folder and whispered to the dark. I won't forget. Before dawn, she geared up. No order given, no team assigned. Just a destination, coordinates scrawled on a scrap of paper. When Vance entered the hangar, she was already by the helicopter, helmet under one arm. You're going alone, he asked. I started this alone. He stared at her for a moment. Bring something back this time, Ana, something besides ghosts. She gave a faint nod. I'll try. The rotors roared to life, scattering dust like ash. As the helicopter lifted, Vance watched her vanish into the horizon, the quiet woman who'd once wanted nothing but peace, now flying back into the fire. He murmured to himself, almost a prayer. God help whoever stands in her way. Up in the sky, Ana felt the weight of the rifle beside her, the vibration through the seat, the pulse of destiny closing in. She wasn't sure what she would find at those coordinates. An enemy, a ghost, or the last fragment of herself she'd never been able to kill. But she knew one thing with absolute clarity. The Marines had given her back a piece of her soul, and she was about to spend it all. Why did the desert feel like memory made solid? The helicopter left her at the edge of nowhere, a strip of cracked earth surrounded by dunes and silence. No sound but the slow dying of the rotor blades and the wind whispering across the sand. Ana stepped out, boots sinking slightly into the dust. The horizon shimmered under the heat, endless and merciless. The pilot leaned out. You sure about this? She adjusted her pack, never sure, just ready. The bird lifted off, vanishing into the light. And then there was nothing. Just her, the desert, and the ghost she'd come to meet. She moved with the rhythm of someone who'd walked 1,000 miles through places no map claimed. Each step deliberate, each scan automatic. The rifle on her shoulder felt like an extension of thought. She followed the coordinates for hours, the sun crawling higher, heat waves bending the horizon into liquid. Finally she saw it, a line of rusted trucks half buried in sand, the remnants of some forgotten convoy. It wasn't random. The tracks leading there were fresh. She crouched beside one of the tire ruts, tracing it with her gloved hand, the tread pattern identical to the ones from the ambush site. Her pulse slowed, controlled breathing. Found you, she whispered. She set up on a ridge overlooking the wrecks, scope scanning the landscape. There were movement patterns below, faint, deliberate. Too deliberate. She watched for 10 minutes before she saw him. Tall, broad-shouldered, moving with that same predatory grace she remembered. Callie. He stepped into the open as if he knew she was watching. Her finger rested on the trigger, breath steady. One pull, 1 second, it would be over. But something about the way he stood, calm, patient, froze her. He wanted her to shoot. She eased her finger off the trigger. Instead, she whispered into the wind, "Not yet." As the sun fell, she moved closer, low, silent, blending with the terrain. Every shadow, every shimmer became potential death. Her body remembered things her mind wished it had forgotten. The tempo of stalking, the taste of adrenaline, the logic of survival. She reached the outskirts of the old convoy, just as darkness swallowed the sky. The air cooled fast, the desert wind turning sharp. Inside one of the trucks, she found the first sign that this wasn't just an enemy hideout. A photograph pinned to the wall. Her. It was an old image, her in uniform, back from a Damascus op. She remembered the day, the camera flash, the smile she'd forced for the report. Below it scrawled in Arabic, "You can't bury the dead if you're still one of them." Her jaw tightened. He was baiting her. And it was working. The first explosion hit without warning. The truck behind her went up in a thunderous roar, fire rolling across the sand. She dove forward, instinct taking over, the shockwave slamming into her spine. Gunfire erupted, staccato bursts from the ridges. She rolled behind the wreck, sighted the nearest muzzle flash and fired once. Silence, then another flash, another clean kill. Her heart pounded, not fear but focus. This was the language she'd once been fluent in. Now it flowed again, terrifyingly natural. Within minutes, the gunfire thinned. She scanned through the scope, 3 bodies down, one still moving. A young fighter, barely 20. He tried to raise his weapon, hands shaking. Ana hesitated. He was Kadir, he was just a boy. "Drop it," she said in Arabic. He froze. Then he did something strange, he smiled. And whispered, "He said you'd come." Before she could react, he pressed a detonator. The blast threw her backward, sand and shrapnel raining down. Her ears rang, vision blurring. Through the haze, she saw him collapse, the boy's body broken, face serene, as if he'd fulfilled some holy mission. She crawled to her knees, coughing blood, disoriented. The trucks burned around her, the night alive with flame. Then she heard it, a voice through the smoke. Low, calm, familiar. "You taught them well." Kadir stepped into view. Same face, same eyes. Only colder now, stripped of the last trace of humanity. "You survived Damascus," he said. "So did I. You burned my men, I buried yours." Ana rose slowly, rifle at the low ready. "You should have stayed buried." He smiled faintly. "You don't understand, I needed you to come. The world forgot us, Callie. The wars ended, but we didn't." She didn't respond. Her breath steadied, her body finding that impossible balance between fury and control. "You think becoming a Marine changes anything," he said. "It's just another uniform, another flag to hide behind." Her voice was quiet but steady. "Maybe, but I chose it, that's the difference." He took a slow step forward. "You chose the illusion of redemption. You and I, we were made for the same thing, killing. You think a new patch erases that?" She tightened her grip. "No, it just means I decide who I kill now." For a long moment, they just stared, 2 ghosts standing in the firelight. Then he raised his weapon. And the desert exploded again. The firefight was surgical, savage. Each shot a memory. Each movement a reflection of years spent hunting each other's shadows. Ana moved with precision, low, weaving, firing between breaths. Kadir was just as fast, his shots slicing the air inches from her head. The old dance, predator and prey, trading places every heartbeat. At one point, she ducked behind a wreck, reloading. He called out, "You could have stayed dead. You could have been free." She shouted back, "I am free." Silence. Then the faint sound of boots crunching sand. He was circling. She closed her eyes for 1 second, listening. The wind shifted, a glint to her left. She pivoted, fired once. The bullet struck true. Kadir fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Ana approached slowly, rifle trained. The firelight danced over them, painting the sand red. Kadir looked up, blood on his lips. "You really think killing me ends it?" "No," she said, "it ends you." He coughed a bitter laugh. "You can't kill the part of yourself that made me." Her eyes softened just a fraction. "Maybe not, but I can live with it." He stared at her for a long time, then whispered almost tenderly, "Then you've forgotten what it takes to survive." His hand twitched toward the detonator on his vest. Ana didn't hesitate. One shot sent her mass. The light went out of his eyes, and the desert fell silent again. She stood there for a long time, staring down at the body. Not in triumph, not in sorrow, just stillness. The fire behind her crackled softly, reflecting in her eyes like the ghost she'd carried for too long. When she finally turned away, the detonator still lay in his open hand. She bent down, removed it gently, and pocketed it. "Not this time," she whispered. Then she walked away, the flames shrinking behind her until they were just another story swallowed by the sand. Hours later, she reached the extraction point. Her uniform was torn, her face streaked with dust and blood. Vance's voice crackled over the radio. "Ana, do you copy?" She pressed the mic, her tone calm. "It's done." "Target confirmed." "Confirmed." A pause. "You all right?" She looked out across the dunes, the first light of dawn spreading across a sky the color of ash. For the first time in years, she said quietly, "Yes." The helicopter arrived as the sun climbed over the horizon. She climbed aboard, the wind whipping through her hair, the desert shrinking beneath her. Torres sat across from her, helmet off, face pale. "He's really gone?" "Yes." He nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. "You did it." Ana looked out the window. The dunes rolled below like waves frozen in time. "No," she murmured, "I ended it." He frowned slightly. "Is there a difference?" She met his gaze. "There always is." When they landed, Vance was waiting. He studied her face, the exhaustion, the calm. "You look different," he said. "I feel different." He nodded. "We'll debrief later. For now, rest." She gave a faint, tired smile. "You still think rest is real?" He almost laughed. "For people like you, maybe not, but it's worth pretending." She slung her pack over her shoulder and walked past him toward the barracks. The Marines saluted as she passed, not for her rank, she had none that they knew of, but for something else. Something wordless. She nodded once in return, a quiet acknowledgement that she'd earned peace the only way she knew how. That night, she sat alone in her quarters, staring at the medal Vance had left on her bunk. No name engraved. No unit. Just a single symbol, the Black Lotus, redrawn in silver. She set it beside her rifle and whispered, "I'm done running." Outside, the desert wind howled softly against the walls, carrying with it the faintest echo of her old name. "Callie." She closed her eyes and let it fade. Why did silence sound louder after the killing stopped? Ana sat by the window of the transport plane, watching the desert dissolve beneath clouds. The horizon blurred into a line of light, dawn, or something like it. She'd forgotten what dawn looked like when it wasn't accompanied by gunfire. Her hands were steady, but her mind still moved in slow rotations, tracking, clearing, scanning. Years of survival didn't end just because someone told you the mission was over. Vance sat across from her, a folder in his lap. He hadn't spoken in hours. When he finally did, it was quiet. "You did what no one else could." Ana didn't look up. "That's the problem." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned her gaze toward the clouds. If no one else could, maybe no one else should have had to. Vance leaned back, studying her profile, the exhaustion that lived beneath her calm. "You can't rewrite the world, Ana." "I'm not trying to," she said, "just trying to live in it." He nodded once, understanding. And for the first time, she believed he really did. When the plane touched down at Cherry Point, the air felt humid again, full of salt, rain, and life. She stepped onto the tarmac, and the first thing she noticed was the sound of waves in the distance. The ocean. It had always been her reset button. Vance handed her a single sheet of paper. "Your record's clean. Sharma stays a Marine. Callie stays dead." She took it, glanced at the seal, then folded it neatly. "Dead's a good place for her to stay." He gave a faint, weary smile. "You sure you don't want an assignment? Your file could buy you anything you want, intel, command, advisory." "No," she interrupted softly. "I've done enough fighting for one lifetime." He studied her for a moment. "So what now?" "I don't know," she said. "Maybe I'll just be." He nodded, offering his hand. She shook it firm, silent. Then he said the thing she hadn't expected. "You remind me of the kind of Marine we used to make, before we started building legends." She gave him a look that was half gratitude, half warning. "Don't build one out of me, sir. I'm tired of ghosts." He smiled, "Fair enough." And then he left, disappearing into the base traffic like a chapter finally closing. Weeks passed. Ana stayed near the coast, a small rented room above a fishing dock, where mornings smelled of salt and coffee, and nights ended with waves tapping at the pylons below. She ran every morning, the same distance, same pace, the rhythm of someone who still needed motion to feel alive. When she wasn't running, she read, fixed things, sat by the water, listening to the slow rhythm of tides that asked nothing of her. People left her alone. She liked that. Anonymity wasn't loneliness, it was peace. One afternoon, she walked into town for supplies. The streets were busy, sunlight bouncing off shop windows. As she passed a diner, she caught her reflection, short hair grown a little longer, uniform traded for civilian clothes. For a heartbeat, she didn't recognize herself. And that felt right. Inside the diner, the TV behind the counter played a news broadcast, headlines scrolling. "Rebel leader killed in Yemen raid." No names, no details. Just a few seconds of grainy footage before cutting to sports. No one paid attention. No one would ever know what it had cost. She ordered coffee, black, and sat by the window. The waitress, a kind-eyed woman about her age, smiled. "You're new around here." "Just passing through," Ana said. "Well, take your time," the waitress replied. "Nobody's rushing you here." Ana almost laughed. Nobody rushing her, that was new. That night she dreamed again, but it wasn't Damascus or the desert or the ambush. It was Paris Island. Garcia's laugh. Roar's quiet nod. Miller's awkward grin. They were marching in perfect formation, voices echoing off the water. And when they turned toward her, they all saluted. She woke with tears on her face. For once, not out of fear, but relief. A few days later, a letter arrived, no return address, just a single line written across the front, from one Marine to another. Inside was a photo. Her old platoon, months after she'd left. Garcia in the center, standing tall in her new uniform. Roar behind them, arms crossed, face half smile. On the back, written in Garcia's handwriting, "We still run every morning, just like you taught us." Ana stared at it for a long time, her vision blurring. Then she smiled, small, genuine, the kind of smile that didn't need to hide behind discipline. She pinned the photo above her desk, beside the window facing the sea. Every time she looked at it, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. One evening she walked down to the pier. The sun was setting, the kind of sunset that burns gold before fading to violet. An old fisherman stood nearby, casting a line. He glanced at her gear, the perfect posture, the quiet control. "Military?" he asked. "Used to be." He nodded. "You folks see things the rest of us can't imagine." She looked out at the horizon. "You'd be surprised what people can imagine." The man smiled faintly. "You ever miss it?" She considered that. The noise, the chaos, the adrenaline, the purpose. Then she shook her head. "I miss the people, not the killing." He nodded again. "Fair answer." She watched the waves for a long time after he left. The wind carried salt and quiet, and something close to forgiveness. Later that night, as she sat on her porch with the radio low and the sea just beyond, she thought about what it meant to survive. Not just physically, but in the way that mattered, surviving yourself. For years, she'd believed survival meant staying invisible. Now she understood it meant staying human. Her past wasn't gone, it never would be. But it was no longer in control. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small detonator she'd taken from Kadyr's body. Cold metal, heavy. For a while she just held it, turning it in her hands. Then she stood, walked to the edge of the pier and tossed it into the sea. It disappeared beneath the waves without a sound. She watched the ripples fade, the water smoothing over like nothing had ever been there. Somewhere behind her, a group of young Marines passed along the dock, laughing, loud, alive. She smiled, listening to them. They reminded her of what she'd fought for, not medals or vengeance, but the chance for others to laugh without fear. One of them caught her eye and gave a quick nod. She returned it, subtle, reflexive. A silent acknowledgement. He didn't know who she was. He didn't need to. That night, a storm rolled in from the sea, thunder rumbling like distant artillery, lightning flashing over the horizon. Ana stood in the rain, face tilted upward, letting it soak her. For once, she didn't flinch at the sound. It wasn't war anymore. It was weather. The difference felt sacred. In the quiet that followed, she dried off, made tea, and sat by the window watching the rain trail down the glass. She thought of all the lives she'd touched, the ones she'd saved, the ones she couldn't. In another life she'd been Callie, a ghost with a rifle, an instrument of invisible wars. Now she was Ana Sharma, a woman who could breathe, who could sleep, who could finally stop counting. She whispered to herself, not as prayer but as truth. "I am more than what I've done." Outside, the storm moved farther out to sea. The clouds thinned, and through the gaps the first stars appeared. She closed her eyes and listened to the wind, the waves, the heartbeat she still couldn't quite believe was hers. Sometimes the world doesn't give second chances. Sometimes you take one anyway. And sometimes you build peace not by running from your past, but by walking beside it. At dawn, she left her room and walked down to the sand barefoot, feeling the cool earth under her feet. The sun rose slow and golden, spilling light across the water. She stood there, breathing in salt and silence, the horizon stretching infinite before her. No weapons, no orders, no ghosts. Just a marine. And the morning. And in that fragile peace, she finally understood. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.